It has been 6 months since DJI released this, the O3 air unit, and today I want to give you a bit of an update on what the situation with the O3 system is today, but also put this out there as a video to DJI saying there are still some things here that we don't like. Please take these on board, because whilst there is a lot of really nice improvements and features with O3, there are some things still missing, and I hope DJI is listening, because we would love for them to bring them to the system. Now, when O3 released, it wasn't a great surprise because we had already had the release of the DJI Goggles 2 alongside the Avata, and the Avata had released as well, which was basically the DJI O3 system in a ready-to-fly drone. It was massively anticipated, and frankly it was the worst kept secret in the FPV world at the time, and whilst there was a huge amount of excitement around what DJI was going to bring next, O3 turned out not necessarily to be the product for everyone, because whilst it does bring a massive improvement in image quality, better recording options, it does have some limitations that don't make it the ideal system for everyone. With the release of the original DJI FPV system, they really did set the benchmark on what a digital FPV system needs to deliver. It was, in my opinion, the first FPV system that was digital to really be a viable product. Not only did it offer low enough latency for proper FPV, but it gave really good image quality as well. Over the lifespan of that system, we had lots of options and improvements. For instance, we had multiple sets of goggles with the V1s and V2s. We had multiple air units with the big air unit with the DVR, or the Caddx Vista or Runcam Link air unit in a smaller package. And then we had all of the cameras from the likes of Runcam, DJI and Caddx as well. Overall, this system grew massively and it became the best digital FPV option that was out there on the market. However, let's not pretend this system was perfect, and there really were a number of issues that did cause people some problems. For instance, it didn't support full canvas mode OSD, and you were limited to using that DJI custom OSD. The DVR on the air unit never really worked properly, and there were lots of annoyances with the system that did make it difficult to use at times, and one of the features I missed the most on it was the fact that you couldn't record the camera view on the goggles themselves. However, it did largely fit into the FPV world that we already had, in the sense of cameras fitted the existing frames, and whilst the VTXs were bigger than what we had on analog, you could get them into most frames, and it really did push digital FPV forward for the masses. So with the next system, DJI had a huge amount to live up to. We had already seen the improvements in their wireless FPV system on the likes of the DJI FPV Drone and many of their other consumer models, and there was a huge amount of excitement around what DJI was going to do next with the FPV system. Now, the idea of O3 was to take what DJI had done before with digital FPV and add in the ability for high-quality DVR recording and basically give you a one-stop solution. There were always going to be some big challenges replacing a dual camera setup like this. FPV cameras don't remotely have the same level of quality that you get from an action camera, and even if you had the same style of sensor, the onboard processing isn't the same. However, what DJI did with O3 is fit the camera with a much larger 1/1.7 inch sensor with a 48 megapixel capability. It has a wide field of view, a gyro sensor, and a lot more processing on board with the E3T chipset, allowing it to basically act as an action camera. There is, though, obviously some compromises to this, because the recording rate of the air unit dictates the latency rate of the camera, because there is a single video pipeline, and as a result of this you are restricted in what latency modes you get when you're setting the recording modes. For instance, O3 will only give you the high latency modes on the Goggles 2 when you're set to 100 frames a second. If you're recording in 30 or any of the other lower frame rates, you will be limited to the normal latency mode, and that is a bit of an annoying restriction compared to what we had on the previous system. What shouldn't be overlooked, though, is the fact that DJI was basically able to shrink down many of the capabilities of the original air unit, i.e. the ability to record, into the O3 air unit in a package that is basically the same size as the Vista. Not only, though, did they manage to get the same capabilities in, there's more hardware in the O3 with that Eagle 3 chipset, and overall, the packaging that DJI have delivered here is simply impressive. It really is incredible when we look at what DJI have been able to do here with what they've packaged into O3. We've got that high bitrate up to 150 megabits a second recording, dual antenna setup, and everything we had in the larger air unit, but now in that much smaller package, but improved in almost every way. In real-world use, O3 does look very good, and whilst it doesn't quite stand up against a GoPro, it is very similar in image quality to the DJI Action 2, and it does a great job of replacing that 2-camera setup, and for most people, it is absolutely going to be enough. Alongside the big headline improvements with the camera and DVR, there are lots of other little things with O3 that are just much better. For instance, there's Canvas Mode OSD. Whilst it works fully with Betaflight, though, it doesn't fully support iNav and ArdriPilot, but for Betaflight users, you do now have that full Canvas OSD support. We also have things like the camera view recording when using the O3 air unit, the built-in gyro that allows you to use the onboard image stabilization, or if you turn that off, the ability to stabilize your footage manually in Gyroflow, and a lot of nice little features that just make this work like we would want an FPV system to work, including the improved range that you get from O3, because it's now no longer limited to that 12 or so kilometers. It will now go as far as 23 kilometers with the O3 air unit, or as much as 30 kilometers with the air unit and the Vista. Now, whilst there is a lot to like, O3, just like the original FPV system, is far from perfect, and actually there are a number of things missing on this system that are on the original one, and there's a number of new quirks that came along with O3 as well. Now, when this system released, the new goggles were only compatible with this O3 air unit, but later on, DJI at Christmas did give us a gift, and they brought us backwards compatibility on the goggles too, to work with the original DJI air unit and the Caddx Vista or RunCam Link. Whilst they brought backwards compatibility, it isn't exactly the same as it was before, and there are some functions specifically to using those air units that are missing as well, but there are functions that do go across the board. And one of them, and the biggest one of them, is the lack of the ability to select the power output. On the original DJI FPV system, you had the manual option of being able to select 25, 500 milliwatts, all the way up to whatever the maximum power setting you had was. DJI do state that the O3 air unit is dynamic in its power output. However, there is no option to limit that power output either. And more than anything, there is no way that people can restrict their output to, say, 25 milliwatts when flying around other users in, say, an indoor setting. This is a massive step back compared to the original system, because it isn't the case that everyone will always want maximum power. There are times where actually we want to limit the power, and DJI are not giving us the option to do that. Now, this is the same on the O3 air unit as well as the RunCam Link Caddx Vista and the DJI air unit when you're using them on that new firmware that does make them compatible with the DJI goggles too, and it's a feature that I think DJI really do need to add. Now, whilst the power output is restricted in the sense of we can't change it, what you can still do though is apply some mods or hacks to allow you to increase the output. However, these are not the same NACO files that we had before. It is now a ham file, and we believe it is very similar power levels to what we had before on the original FPV system. But again, because we don't have any option to select the power, we don't really know. But what is good with the O3 is that we are not completely restricted to being limited by whatever the power is in your region. But what we don't know for sure is what the maximum RF power output is. But at least we know there is a way of getting more from the system, and it is more than you see on CE and more than FCC, and in my tests it is comparable to the 1200 that we had on the original system when looking at it side by side on the spectrum analyzer. The next big feature that O3 lacks is the ability to see what latency mode you're in. The display on the original FPV system actually showed the latency that you were getting on the system in real time. However, the O3 system does not. Whilst it does show bitrate, there is no visual representation of latency. You don't know what latency mode you're flying in, and you don't know what the latency is as you're using the system. You actually do have a readout for what the bitrate currently is, but that isn't a true reflection of the latency mode itself. And because of the way the O3 system works, in the sense that its recording mode is tied to the latency mode, there are many people that don't fully understand how the O3 system actually works and may be flying in the high latency mode when they actually may want to be in the low latency mode. For instance, when you fly with the O3 system in 25 or 30 frames a second, you are stuck using it in the high latency mode. However, there is no visual representation of that on the screen for the user, other than the fact that you do get stutters from the image and the overall latency feel is higher. I think DJI should reintroduce the latency visual readout that you had on the original FPV system, and also highlight the fact that what mode you're in on recording will affect the latency mode that you're viewing the image in as well. And when you select one of the recording modes that pushes it into high latency mode, DJI should actually have something like a high latency logo on the screen, or a H or an L, to be able to tell you which latency mode you're flying in. Now, further to this, whilst at the moment it is restricted to limiting the latency by the recording mode, I'd actually like to see this separated if possible, and then have the ability to manually set the latency mode separate from the recording modes. And even if it's the case that you can't separate them off, what would be good is to be able to say, I only want to use low latency mode, and then only give you the recording options that are available in that mode as well. Now, this predominantly affects the O3 ear unit, because when you use the Goggles 2 with the DJI ear unit or the Runcam Link Cadex Vista, there is actually an option for selecting the high or low latency mode, and that is because there is no recording on board those ear units compared to the O3, and as such, you're able to restrict the latency mode directly there. DJI should basically bring that across to O3, and as I've said, either allow us to have separate recording and live view latency modes, or at least allow us to select the latency mode we want and then only show the recording modes that are available in that latency mode. The final thing with regards to the O3 ear unit specifically is the camera, and the fact that there is only one available. You can only use this DJI O3 camera with the ear unit, and this camera isn't the best with regards to its repairability or availability of parts. For instance, it uses a customized lens which you can't replace, and if you were to damage the camera, you're going to end up having to replace the whole module, and that comes in at around £100 or $100. I would love to see compatibility for either the older cameras made available on O3, or DJI allow third-party manufacturers to bring us cameras that not only give us some more options for repairability, but also give us improved low light features, or just some other options like we're seeing from the likes of the Avatar HD system. Cadex, for instance, made some of the best cameras that were available on the original FPV system, and it would be great to see them have the ability to bring their cameras to the O3 system as well. And if it can't be Cadex, it can be Runcam, but we do need someone to bring us some more cameras, because whilst the O3 camera is very good, it certainly isn't perfect for everyone. Now, one of the nice new features of the O3 camera is the fact that it does have a built-in gyro sensor that allows it to stabilize the footage by the DJI Rocksteady stabilization on board, but also allows you to use it with gyro flow in wide mode. What we have found, though, is that this camera is very susceptible to vibrations, and you've seen a whole slew of new frames from manufacturers trying to get around this. Many manufacturers have moved over to using TPU mounts, or even silicon mounts like we've got here on the iFlight. What is also clear is that this camera can be affected by your ESC PWM frequency as well, and DJI actually recommend moving your PWM frequency either from 24 to 48 or even 96, and that can help reduce the vibrations that will affect the gyro sensor and hopefully try to remove some of the jello from the camera. It is clear though in my own tests and many other people's that it is quite hard to get footage from this camera absolutely perfect, and you will need to use an ND filter in very bright conditions, and you're going to need to do some tweaks to the mounting to get the best results. Now, as I mentioned, that is the issues for the O3 ear unit, but there are some specific ones for the DJI ear unit and the Vista Link when using them with the goggles too. For those who don't know, there is a rather complicated situation around this, in the sense there is a special firmware that you need to use on these ear units to make them compatible with these goggles. It is available to download via the DJI Assistant 2 app. However, if you install it to make it compatible with these, it will no longer work with the V1 or V2 goggles. And I do have a dedicated video explaining that, and if you're interested in seeing it, I will put a link to it in the description. Now, as for the specific quirks and issues around these ear units, some of them are the same as the O3. For instance, the lack of ability to select the power output. However, as I mentioned, you do on these ear units have the ability to select the latency mode. What you don't have though is some of the main basic features with these ear units. For instance, there is no auto record option with these ear units, whether it be on the ear units themselves or the goggles. You cannot tell it to record on takeoff with either of these, and you will always have to set it to manually record. There is no recording available on the Caddx Vista on this system, as there was not on the old one, but when using the ear unit with these new goggles, you don't have the onboard DVR either, and DJI did hint in their earlier firmware that they may bring that in the future, but it still isn't available today. So if you are going to use the original ear units, the only way you can record is on the goggles directly, and unfortunately there is no auto record on takeoff option when using them. There is also a quirk where you can't record the display view on the goggles too when using the original ear unit and Vista. When using the O3, you have the ability to record either a clean feed on the goggles or record with the OSD shown. However, when using the Vista or the ear unit, you don't have that option, and it will only record a clean view image. Now, that is the quirks with regards to the O3 ear unit and the ear unit and Vista. There are though some quirks with the O3 RF system itself that does transcend all of these. One of the big ones is the fact that low power mode doesn't work the same as it did before on the original FPV system. For instance, on the old system, when you turned off low power mode, you got maximum RF power output. That though is not the case on the O3 ear unit or these ear units when used with the goggles too, and turning off low power mode does not kick it into the full RF output like you get with the ham file, for instance. Only when receiving an arming command from the flight controller does the O3 system or these ear units go into the maximum RF power, and this really does restrict people from using this with the likes of fixed wing, gliders and other models that don't have a flight controller on board. DJI, we really need you to fix this low power mode and give us the option of being able to select the maximum RF output without having to use a flight controller. Further to that, there's also some real quirks with the O3 system in signal loss as well, and the amount of time it will take to recover the connection to the link. It has been observed by many people that the O3 system does not reconnect on signal loss remotely as easily as the original FPV system did, and in fact there's been cases where their aircraft has almost flown back overhead in a return to home mode before the ear unit has reconnected. Now, I have actually tested a lot of this on my spectrum analyzer, and there really is nothing specific in the RF setup that should be causing this, and it really does seem to be a software bug or quirk of the O3 system that does cause this behavior to kick in, and DJI really do need to again optimize this so it will reconnect as soon as possible when the signal is reconnected. Now, before I move on to the positives, I want to talk about this thing, the DJI remote 2. Now, there was a horrible quirk with this when it released, in the sense when you lost the goggle signal, the remote signal went as well. And whilst that is okay for DJI's ready-to-fly drones, that really is not desirable behavior when using it with the O3 Air unit. There was also some really horrible behavior around the way it acted in signal loss, and I can happily say that DJI have improved this, but I still don't personally recommend anyone uses this, because whilst the RC link does largely remain independent of the goggle link now, after the goggle link drops, there can be a period of sort of 4 to 5 seconds where it will actually switch frequency, drop into failsafe and come back out of it. Overall, the RF behavior on the remote really isn't good, and my personal opinion remains that you should not use this for anything but park flying, and if you're flying anywhere where there is a risk of losing your aircraft, you should move on to a more traditional RC system such as Express LRS, Crossfire, or one of the many others available on the market. Whilst on the remotes, there is the frankly crazy situation with compatibility with the original remote as well as the Remote 2. For instance, if you have the black remote, you can use that with these two Air units, which is the Air unit and the Vista, when using with the goggles V1 and V2s. However, if you were to buy an O3 Air unit that will work with the V2 goggles, this remote won't work. And if you want to use the O3 with the V2 goggles, you have to use the Remote version 2, but you can't use that with those Air units on those goggles. So if you wanted to fly these 3 Air units with the goggles too, you can absolutely do it, but if you wanted to use the DJI remotes, you'd actually have to have one of each. However, if you wanted to then use these Air units with the goggles too, or the Integras, you can't use the black remote at all, and you end up having to use the V2 grey remote, and overall it is just a complete and utter crap show that DJI still need to sort out. That then leads on to the complete mess with firmware, because whilst I did say DJI brought backwards compatibility for these 2 Air units with these goggles, if you do use them with this, they will no longer work with the V1 or V2s, and you either have to have the firmware that allows them to work on the V1 or V2s, or the firmware that allows them to work on the goggles 2 and Integra. But what you can't do is have both of these goggles and bind them to both, because you would have to change the firmware every time you wanted to swap goggle. And again, it is just another mess that DJI have left us with. On top of that, we then have the problem with the binding on the V2s. For instance, if you switch from the Air unit mode to the O3 mode, you will lose the bindings for them. And when you switch back, you will lose the bindings for that. And this is an ongoing issue that DJI still haven't fixed on the V2s. If you do use these Air units, though, on the goggles too, that problem has been fixed. But most people are still running the V2s today. And it was great that DJI did give us O3 compatibility on these, but it would be great if they did sort out this firmware mess with both the remote controllers as well as the lack of bindings when you switch mode. Now, whilst that has been a lot of doom and gloom, there is also a lot of positives with O3. For instance, its reliability since release has been fantastic. Whilst there has been the odd broken Air unit or the odd camera issue, overall, its reliability has been right up there with the original DJI Air units. And again, they really have delivered a product that stands above the rest when it comes to overall quality. The overall picture quality from the O3 system is very good, but it isn't the easiest system to tune and get right, especially with regards to vibration isolation and that gyroflow sensor. For instance, the O3 Air unit and camera is susceptible to vibration, and it is recommended that you do use some of the higher PWM rates on your ESC, which can help reduce the vibrations on the camera, and soft mounting in silicon is definitely a must if you want to get the very best overall performance. With regards to the recording and the DVR though, things have improved massively over the last system. The image quality recorded is very good. The DVR has no issues like the slow SD card error we had before. And overall, it does a great job of replacing your action camera if you did want to do that. About the only thing I will say is it's a shame that you are limited on the recording rates compared to the live view rates. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it would be nice to have DJI actually show us us that in the OSD, but also allow us to lock it in the low latency mode and then be limited to the recording modes that brings, or even, if they could, allow us to have separate recording modes and latency modes. About the only real complaint on the image quality is its low light performance. It really isn't great. It is interesting, especially when you look at the fact that it is a larger sensor than we've had on any of the cameras in the past, yet it doesn't particularly do well in the dark at all. And it would be great, again, if DJI could work with some third-party manufacturers and bring us some cameras that would give us some options like we now see on the Avatar HD system. Whilst on image quality, another real plus point is the live view image quality on O3, because it is simply outstanding. It also flies further than the original FPV system, being limited to 23.4 kilometers on the O3 air unit, but actually allowing you to fly as far as 30 kilometers when using the Vista or the DJI air unit with that new firmware. That is far enough for pretty much 99% of pilots, and overall the RF performance of O3 is dramatically better than we've seen on the previous system. The live view image quality is just hands down the best that is available on the market today. With regards to the lower signal performance on O3, it is definitely better than the previous system. It still has that focus mode behavior, but it certainly isn't as apparent. It really isn't the same size blocks that we saw before. It's much smaller, and that is due to the improved H.265 codec in the system. And as you can see, as the signal drops, you're not getting that large block in. It's smaller blocks as you move through the lower signal area, and then the picture cleans up as you move out the other side, and it's just a lot easier to fly through lower signal situations with O3 than it was with the previous system. Moving on from the system, there are some things we need to talk about on these, the DJI goggles 2. Now, these are very much a contradiction because they are a fantastic product. The size and weight is really good. The overall performance of the goggle is fantastic, and they give great image quality. However, they do have two fundamental issues. The biggest being the fitment. They are not the easiest to get right on your face, and for me, I'm still struggling to get those optics clear end to end, and I find setting the displays to about 80% is about perfect. Also, these goggles have some of the worst anti-fogging performance that I have had in any goggle period. The fan is basically non-existent, and if you're in a hot area or you're someone like me who sweats, these goggles will literally get dripping wet, and it really does make using them out in the field particularly difficult at times. Now, there are some good pieces of advice that you can take to try and help improve that. For instance, using anti-fog spray on the lenses helps, and making sure that you don't leave them on your head when not flying, making sure there's plenty of airflow. However, the overall design of these goggles is compromised by the fact that the face mask fit isn't particularly good, and the anti-fog performance is non-existent because the fan is at the front dragging air through, and it simply is not powerful enough to do anything with the moisture from your face. Now, with the release of O3, DJI did cause waves in the FPV world, and we saw a whole slew of new frames as well as bind and fly drones, all built, designed to take that O3 air unit on board. And all of the main manufacturers, such as iFlight, SpeedyBee and the likes of Gep RC, have all released frames up to the size of 10-inch and all the way down to 2.5-inch as well. Today we also have a dramatic amount more info on how the O3 system works compared to the previous ones and compared to the other ones on the market. I've made teardown videos on the O3 air unit as well as the goggles too, and I've uploaded a lot of info around this onto repair.wiki as well, and I've even done deep dive videos onto the O3 system with regards to its RF performance, taking a look at the FCC modes, but also understanding how the O3 air unit link works. And overall, we know a lot more today about how this system works than we did in the past, and really it's the one system we probably know the most about. So, in the end, where are we at with the DJI O3 system 6 months later? Well, DJI have given us a few updates. They gave us backwards compatibility with these air units, which many of us, including me, said would never happen. They have added some new features as time's gone on. However, there are still things that need addressing, as I've said at the start, but it is still one of the very best options available in the digital FPV market space today. And if you're someone who wants image quality above all else, this is the best hands down. But it isn't perfect, and there are real compelling options out there from the likes of HD0 that is going to give you the lowest latency possible, and the Avatar HD system that is giving you really nice image quality on their new V2 Pro camera. They're giving you gyro flow, but they're also giving you night cameras and lots of different options, and that is something that DJI simply isn't doing today. I would love to see DJI release an Air Unit Lite or a reworked one-board version of the Vista with more cameras, giving people the options that they want. If they need a recording unit, they can go with the O3, and if they then just want a live view system like the Vista, they can have a single board option. We know it's possible. There's no reason they can't deliver it, and they could then bring us some more cameras as well, again bringing the fight back to Cadex. Now, if you were to ask me what is the best FPV system on the market today, I actually wouldn't say it is DJI O3. O3 has absolutely taken the market for high-end, best image quality, best live view feed. However, it isn't the best overall solution because of many of the things I've discussed in this video, and my opinion is actually Avatar is the best overall FPV system for most users because there are multiple options from a receiving point of view. We've got their goggles, which are very good, and we also have their VRX module. On the VTX side, we've got the full-size VTXs, multiple camera options. You've got the Pro camera, the V2, the V1, and then you've got the 1S kit and smaller cameras as well. And DJI are just not providing remotely the same level of wide compatibility as Avatar is. The only person who is, though, is HD0, and again, they're offering lots of solutions with the HD0 goggles, the VRX modules, the cameras and VTXs, and they're the only option that really does compete with Avatar when we talk about wide compatibility. But HD0 is not quite up there with regards to image quality, but it is really the only option if you want the very lowest latency. So really it comes down to a question of what you want from a system. Do you want the very best image quality? That is O3. If you want the best overall wide compatibility with good performance, that's Avatar HD. And then you've got HD0, which offers the lowest possible latency, but not quite coming up with the additional features that we see on Avatar. So whilst there is a lot to like with O3, it certainly isn't the perfect system for everyone. Now, I know there are many of you shouting right now saying, but what about the original FPV system as well? Surely that makes DJI much more compelling compared to, say, Avatar. Yes, there is no question when we look at what the original FPV system does and the fact you can bring those Air units over, but that system is basically end of life. There is no real supply of the V2 goggles anymore. You can only get them with the FPV drone, and we do not know how long you're going to be able to get the Cadex Vista or Runcam Link. Yes, Runcam are still making cameras, but they're not remotely as good as the original Cadex Nebula Pro or the original DJI camera because they don't have all of the features, and it really does feel like that original system is now end of life. It isn't going away from the used market, but from when we talk about it from a new product, it's hard to include that in this system today because we have O3 Air Unit, we have Goggles 2 and Integra, and whilst there is support on the V2s and those Air units, that isn't something that is going to be there forever in the sense of you're not going to be able to buy those products forever. As I've said earlier, if DJI did want to take back the crown, we really do need to see more VTX, more cameras, and maybe a 1S as well. But do any of us really think that's going to happen? Probably not. Now, at the end of this video, I'm just going to share with you some of the footage that I have captured from the O3 system across various quads. It isn't designed to be anything pretty or special. It's just footage I've taken whilst testing the system or reviewing quads. And really, for me, I think it gives just a nice overview of what the O3 system is capable of from an image quality point of view. It isn't particularly harsh flying or bando flying where you'll see a lot of light and dark, but what it does show off some of the image recording capabilities of this system. Now, If you have found this video useful, please do let me know what you think in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know if you agree with me, if you don't, and if you have any questions, put them in there as well, and I will try and answer them. Furthermore, I just want to say, if you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making videos like this in the future, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the description. I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons. I would not have been able to buy the DJI O3 system without your support. I was not sent this by DJI. This was bought on the channel, and if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep doing that in the future, please do consider checking it out. Anyway, that's it on this one. I'm going to leave you with the footage. Stay safe, and I will speak to you soon.